Hello, everyone, and welcome to the MakerDAO Meet Your Delegate meeting, number 10. Slightly out of order, but nevertheless. We're joined here by two potential new recognized delegates, Duan Nam and Flipside Crypto. So I'll just go over the sort of brief ground rules for these meetings, how they're structured. So the general format is we give each delegate, so we start with one delegate and have them sort of briefly summarize their platform for the group here, and then we open it up for a Q&A. It tends to take half an hour in total, and then we'll switch over to Flipside and get them to do the same. Yeah, so just remember this meeting's being recorded, so yeah, try not to talk over each other or anything. We'll call for questions. If there's a sort of lull, feel free to chime in, or feel free to raise your hand if you're more comfortable with that. So without further ado, I guess, yeah, do you want to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your platform?
Yes, thank you so much for inviting, and it's good to see you guys. So my presentation will be largely based on my Delegate platform that I posted on Maker Forum. If you don't have the link, I'll post on the chat so you can check it out. I will start by introducing myself. So I'm a part-time contributor to Maker Growth, help with their especially Asian community, and also I'm a co-founder at StableNode, which invests and also help to run different blockchain nodes as well. And then I'll briefly also introduce myself, and then also kind of go into my core values as well as statement. So I joined Maker since late 2018. Initially starting with helping with this Korean community, and then later went to business development and helping with its in the Asian market. Funny thing is that actually before Maker, I was in a different project trying to create a different stablecoin. Back then, didn't really have a term for stablecoin, so they just wanted something that was a coin that's pegged to stable value. And then they wanted me to review Maker, so that's how I got to learn about Maker. And then I realized that back then there was not much material on Maker. Now I was pretty confident that I might be able to beat Maker, mainly because I was very confident in my ability. I was like, at least our team has me, maybe it's going to be better. But we saw that I was able to be more successful. But at the same time, we saw that because there are not much materials in especially Korean or Chinese, so that's why I also translate some of the different guides how to create it. And as some of you guys probably remember, initial way to mint what we call a SI was pretty complex. So such materials were kind of needed. Now, fast forward to now, especially the Asian community has been disappeared a lot. So the reason is that although Asia is still a very big market and also a lot of users come from there, we don't have really the ways to keep community in place. So this is same for Korea, same for China as well. So we had, for example, community leads that were leading some of those communities. And then ever since the foundation dissolved, we don't have them anymore. As well as there are different regulatory and then some of the social changes that are happening in Asia. So for example, I also kept in contact with our Chinese side, and then we don't have a Chinese community chat for WeChat anymore, partly because Chinese government has been cracking down on it. So even those people who want to let's learn about Maker, there's not really good ways for them to learn. And then this is also true for Maker holders as well. I think that one of the truths is that we don't know about it, partly because there's not really a good way for them to voice their opinion, right? It's partly that many of them don't really speak English and then don't really have access to it. And I felt that we need a delegate that can represent their interests and also can communicate with them. So as I can talk in Korean as well as some Chinese as well, I felt that it was kind of needed to have a delegate that can kind of meet their needs and also communicate with them. And apology if some of my word choices are not optimal as it's 3 a.m. But that's also, I think, the reason why it's a little bit hard for people in Asia to really, participate. And then that's why I thought that somebody needs to kind of be a delegate to be that kind of bridge. So that kind of relates to some of the core values, which is that it's a little bit different from some of the other delegates who have been focusing a lot on the economic aspects or some of the whether it's a fee or others. So for me, the focus has been trying to connect between the West and East, especially in terms of information, in terms of their interests, in terms of their feedback. And other one is the diversity of different ideas as well as different communities. So, and then the third part is, being pragmatic. I put in that one because not every initiative will be related to first two, but I didn't want to limit myself to just two. And then especially since if it's pragmatic, that can help all kinds of community, not just communities in Asia or others. I felt that it was kind of needed to, go through it. So in terms of that, I also wrote down some of the delegate next steps that kind of relate to core values. So those will be some of the initiatives, whether that will be proposed by me or whether it's proposed by others, that I'll probably support very strongly, which is trying to have a larger presence and also different content across different countries, especially focusing on Asia, because right now a lot of contents and other communities are focusing a lot on English speakers, which so far work, but at the same time there are also many different communities that need to also access and learn more about Maker. And then in order for makers to really truly achieve DeFi for all, I believe that it is a needed step. And another one is also aggressively increasing DAI access. That meaning that especially in Asia, a lot of users have been very sensitive in terms of transaction fee, as well as, so actually many of people here don't really use MetaMask or web wallet. A lot of them use mobile wallet. That has been true for payment as well. As some of you guys probably visited Singapore or China or Korea, a lot of people just pay with their, their phone or like WeChat or this kind of thing, right? So it's very kind of easy for people here to access their crypto and DApp through mobile and very easy ways. Or for example, if you look at some of the competitor like Terra, a lot of their payment happens behind it, and then people don't even know that it's blockchain. So I felt that for things like this, important. And then so if there's an initiative that can help with it, I will also strongly support it. Now going toward conflict of interest, because I'm a contributor to Maker Growth, obviously I have a conflict of interest there. But I can say that I already voted against some of the initiatives that they proposed or they collaborate on. So I'm not going to shy away from voting against or voting for, because I believe that, if there's an initiative that's, for example, go against some of the core value, I think it's fair that I vote against it. So, and then since co-founder StableNode, because the company invests in different projects, there also means that some of the partners or some of the portfolio companies might have some of the conflict interest. So some of them will be like InstaDApp, Superfluid, as well as Monotalis. I understand right now is also in discussion, right? As well as like Clayton and Polygon. So there will be many, and then before voting, if it's something that's applicable, I will note in my conflict of interest section. And then in terms of some of the personal holdings, unfortunately, I don't have too much. I wish I had more, but I don't. So I have mostly ETH Maker, and then some of the stable coins, and then I also invest in some of the private sale for Ep.10 and Blackpool, and also Solace. And then I indirectly hold some of the Upbit exchange equity. But then if there are any other conflict of interest that comes up that's related to voting, I will note them. And then I will leave the rest of the time for questions and some of the clarification.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for that, Du. Very comprehensive. Yeah, as Du said, any questions, feel free to chime in.
Hey, Du. Thanks for the presentation there, explanation. Excited to have you on board as a fellow delegate, 3F delegate here, Frank Cruz. With regards to that side of the world, Asia, what do you think are some of the things that your platform can help MakerDAO with as far as getting more exposure? I know right now, as far as the community's focus, well, as far as the community's ability to reach that that far out in the world. That's from my point of view out here in the US, but it's only you and Jocelyn of Growth Core Unit, and maybe a few other folks like Will of RWF Core Unit. So yeah, just wondering what your thinking is and how you can help Maker DAO as a whole get more exposure to that part of the world.
Yes, so I think that it can involve two main ways, right? So one of them is looking at more for MCAR holders as well. And this is something that I think that even back at the Maker Foundation didn't really really look at. Is that like, so the community and the government has looked at a lot of, for example, Maker holders in, let's say, US or Europe a lot of times. But then for a lot of, let's say, it's either funds or others that hold Maker, we didn't really kind of talk about how they can access, right? So a lot of holders right now, although it is global right now, like despite their size, it's very small, right? So we have to kind of think about ways for them to more actively participate. So that's there are several funds based in Asia that hold Maker, or they invest in Maker and they hold it as well, but they haven't been really put into use or been so. So actually, there are so to give a example, there was one fund, they're based in Korea and they hold Maker, and they've been interesting Maker governance, and then have participate a few times, but then they never really delegate to vote, because at the same time they also felt that they were not even sure whether they can share their opinion, right? Because they felt like, okay, there are a lot of big funds based in the West, they might delegates might share their opinion, but they kind of felt that the kind of connection was not there. But that's not true, right? Like, because the thing is that for us, we're interested in feedback, whether it's from the West or East. So I think that that's one area that I'm going to focus on, which is trying to target some of the Maker holders in Asia to basically participate, come to forum if needed. I also got some feedback that right now Discord doesn't have a Chinese section, a Korean section. Like, if that's needed, that's something that we can probably create as well. Obviously, we'll have to figure out like what will be the good ways to proceed and things like that. So that's the first part, which is on the Maker holder side. Second part is more for DAI users and also Maker like a vault users, which historically has been actually maintained okay, but then right now it has fallen. To give you like how extreme it happened is like, for example, WeChat, which had thousands of users, like now the community is gone. But that's actually for safety as well, because Chinese government has been kind of cracking down on a lot of it. So it kind of means that we need a smarter way to basically have a community where people can access information, but also do not put themselves in such danger. So for those, whether it's whether it's a new marketing team, whether it's a growth or others, we'll have to kind of think about ways that we can create a new strategy for Asia. For Korea as well, we've been seeing a lot of users kind of falling. And then for those, I think that it'll be a combination of some of the translation and also active communication, right? Because by having somebody that can, for example, they can come out and then whether it's asking questions or keep them updated, I think it's very important. And then since right now we don't really have a specific core unit that kind of focus on it, especially, I mean, we have a core unit that focuses on different contents, obviously, but not necessarily like translating into Korean or Chinese or other Asian languages. So if there's initiative or if there's a core unit already that wants to do that, I think that's something that I will be happy to discuss together. And then if they already have an initiative in the plan, I'll be happy to vote as long as it's reasonable, which kind of goes back to third core value, which is like, I want to be pragmatic. So even if it's good for the community, if it's like too expensive and doesn't make sense, like I believe that there are probably better ways to do it. So that was a long way to answer your question, but that's my thought.
Yeah, it's always good to be pragmatic. And I'll say one real quickly. You always been a visionary, right? I like the fact that you went out to Jet Protocol on a totally different layer one, and you decided to put an application for DAI. So what's your vision there going forward? Are you going to continue to push that envelope?
Yeah, so I think that, so that also relates to some of the points I mentioned earlier, which is that I want to make sure that DAI is used in everywhere, and that especially for people to access it easier, more easily, So for example, we saw that there have been increasing usage on on Solana, whether it's a DApp or whether it's via some of the exchanges that support it. For example, as you know, FTX has been growing its power, and then a lot of people use actually FTX itself as a bridge. Some of the numbers that I saw was that actually not many people use the wormhole that Solana uses. I think around like 70% actually used through FTX exchange, which is like very big. So so my thinking also was that, okay, since a lot of people were start to use FTX, also from Asia as well, by having DAI on Solana and then also integrating with FTX can really increase the access, right? Especially people who are very worried about the high transaction fee. I would say that that has been also the thought behind, let's say, working with Clayton, or there might be some new mainnets in the future or layer 2, but I've been like I will say that within Maker, some people might consider me kind of heretic, but for me, it was like I always believe that like it's important for more and more people to access it, which especially I have a very strong opinion regarding having a minimum amount to open a vault, because I personally heard a lot of feedback, as well as saw many different people who want to try out Maker Vault, but they can't because they need to open a much larger one. And then the thing is that for those people, a few thousand is not a small amount, right? And then it's understandable why we did it, but I felt that it also really reduced some of the access, and then also some of the excitement and some of the community that we could have gotten from that.
I have a question. I don't know if we're supposed to just speak up.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so obviously, I'm one of your great supporters, a little biased because I've worked with you on the growth team for a while, and I know how knowledgeable you are and impactful you are to the growth team. But just actually hearing you talk about the being this bridge to Asia, it did lead me to a question that is, I'd love to hear your thoughts, but actually kind of broadly is, do you think protocols, decentralized protocols with governance systems in place like Maker should intentionally look towards having delegates that represent geographical regions, because it is so important to have those local voices who understand the cultures, understands the regulatory challenges more intimately, being that kind of representative to voters in those places. So for example, not just Asia, but like, would you say it would be optimal to have delegates in each continent? Again, this is broadly, maybe not just specific to Maker, but as a design of delegation overall. Do you think that would be something that would, significantly or incrementally impact, kind of the voter participation and decision making?
Yeah, so I'm glad that you brought that up, and I think that it will happen, organically, right? Because I don't think that for Maker, community or the governance is thinking like, okay, we should have somebody in, let's say, Latin America, we should have somebody in Asia, we should have somebody like representing Africa or others, right? I think the more of the Maker governance, anybody can come, and then, like for example, there can be another person from Asia, or let's say there can be somebody else that's focused more specifically on China, right? Because for me, I know much about, for example, China and Korea, but maybe there's somebody that focus solely on China. I think that's fine, because I think similar to any other governance or community, there might be people who have different opinions, as well as different interests they can reflect. So I wouldn't say that it's something that's like official policy, and then the Maker governance should have set some people be like, okay, from now on you're going to represent all the Asian voters. So if you are in Asia, you should vote for me. Like, I don't think that with the policy, but I think that it's just a kind of natural transition where, like, as Maker is becoming more and more global, we're going to see more delegates or others that try to represent a certain interests that they feel like it's kind of neglected. And I think that's something that we see. If you look at some of the, whether it's some of the government or others, is that if there's a voice that people don't know about, it's not necessarily because there's no voice. It's just that there's nobody to hear them, right? So I think that we're going to see that happening in the future as well. So it can be something that's not just based on geography. Maybe it's a certain industry, or there might be some people, for example, who might be representing more of the legacy finance side, which I think that something that we saw with some of the delegates as well. So I would say that not just geography, also many different interests and others. We're going to see more of it. If there, hopefully that respond your question, but if not, okay, thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Jen and Du. Peyton, question?
Yeah, I guess I was kind of curious about the kind of scaling DAI aspect of things. Like obviously a lot of the stuff you pointed out, I think is really strong for helping scaling the DAO itself. But I was curious if you wanted to elaborate a little bit on what your thoughts are for like the best way to grow DAI supply essentially.
Yeah, I would say that there are obviously many different ways that DAI supply has been increased. And then, this is, I think, also the part that in the Beckett Foundation, some people thought that I was kind of heretic, which is that, for me, was that DAI maintaining its peg and also expanding itself is more important than trying to basically have only ETH as a collateral. And you can imagine that there were some interesting fights, whether it's a philosophical debate or others. But so I will say that there can be many different kind of collateral, and we're definitely seeing more experimental ones, right? Because we've been seeing some of the real world asset expanding. And then we also seeing, for example, trying to work with Aave to provide it, and then to kind of make sure that we also provide more. And then I think that we can use that for other DeFi protocols as well, right? So technically, the DAI itself is not really backed per se as like the traditional one, but it's also a good way for us to provide liquidity, and then also to make sure that we work closely with other DeFi protocols. So I would say that we're going to see more of those kind of experimental ones as well. In terms of something that I think we should also look at is like increasing DAI itself is great, but it's just the question about, okay, who are we serving? One, and then two is that like, what can we do with it, right? Because I think that what we kind of looked at, like when we looked at DAI supply, we just kind of looked at like, oh, here's like, let's say 10 billion DAI or like 11 billion DAI. That is a good milestone as well. But the question is like, if the point of DeFi, and this is something that I believe that a lot of people, not just me, strongly believe is like, if we say that DeFi is there to change the world and also trying to, bank the unbanked, people who do not have access to it. Like even myself, if I want to get a loan, I have to sign like 30 times to get a loan. We're trying to make it simple. Then we have to also make sure that they have access to it, right? And then that's also the reason why I believe that some of those, we might have their vault might be smaller, but we want to have more of them, right? So I think that probably on Ethereum might be a little difficult for now, but maybe on the future, whether it's a layer 2 other mainnets, I can see that happening. Or even if it's like indirectly helping, like for example, there might be a different protocol that launches on different, let's say like different blockchain, and then we have this PSM with them. So in effect, we get to reach out to them so people can easily use it. I think that's also a good way. So I would say that we have to kind of look at not just expanding DAI, but just like who is it for, and then like who can really access it.
Thanks.
We've got time for one or two more. Anyone got anything in the ready or? Okay. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I was gonna say that you don't have to ask serious questions per se. If there's any personal question that you're curious, or because I didn't really explain like I mean I talk about my experience at Maker and others, but if you're curious about like some others or like why I'm passionate about Maker and things like that, like I'm also happy to answer for others.
I guess I maybe have one, right? So obviously we've seen recently that like revenues for the DAO have been dropping slightly as a result of less like demand for borrowing on Ether and some of the other vaults. I guess in a situation where the DAO is in a point where it's sort of spending more than it's bringing in, like, I guess, how would you approach that as a delegate, right? Like, sort of what sort of things would you consider, like, what actions would you consider taking place? Sorry, pushing for and all that sort of stuff.
Yep. I'll say that if the revenue is dropping, now, to be honest, because I'm looking from pragmatic, I think that we might also need to kind of review our plans in a way. That's something that I also realized is that people are very afraid of sometimes voting no against some of the budgets increases, and I can understand that, right? Because if you vote against it, then for example, whether it's a coordinator, others, they have their plans and they believe that they're very good plans, right? That's why they say that, like, we have this new plan, we can expand it, we can help DAI, and then that's why we want to increase it. But at the same time, we understand that there has been no government agency that actually has fewer people, right? So I think that that's something that I've kind of afraid as well. Is like, okay, if you look at the revenue side, obviously we have to look at, for example, supplier tie and things like that. But at the same time, we also have to look at the, like, spending side. I think that that's something that we have to look at, both, because it's possible that we might be able to use that for better uses, right? So I would say that in terms of different collateral, that's something that we've been researching a lot, especially in terms of real world assets. I do think that there will be a time that whether it's a risk team or others, will have to think like, okay, we can technically earn more revenue, but then this might be a little riskier. But the ideal situation would be like, okay, this is similar risk, but then it can be, it's much more scalable, right? So so in response to your question is like, I think that we need to kind of look at our spending as well, which I think will be very controversial, but I will not be shy, away from such. And then I know that some of them might be people who know me personally, but don't get offended, because I think that that's also needed, right? And then the second part is that I think that we'll definitely have to look at some of the collateral, because that's where the revenue right now comes from. Like, unless Maker does different business model, I think that for now the revenue comes from the stability fee and the collateral, and then loan. So the question is that, okay, how can we really increase this kind of collateral and the vault and others, which in the end will come from, okay, how can we assess it, how can we scale it, as well as, like, kind of going back, is like, okay, if we for example, if there are people who cannot use DAI or vault because of, let's say, fee, or they don't know about it, then that's something that we can help with, whether it's marketing or whether it's different mainnet or layer 2. So I think that we'll kind of focus on that as well.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you, Du. That was very thorough. All right, I think we'll think about moving on. Du, are there any sort of final words or sort of shout outs or anything you want to share before we move on to Flipside?
For me, I just want to say thank you so much for inviting. And then I must say that this was actually very hard decision, because I've been working for Maker for long, and then I've been also looking at so many great delegates. But so for me was that I don't really want to compete with delegates. It's more for that I saw that, and that I heard from many, that they want their voice to be heard, and they want to be also share their feedback with others. So if there are any others that you can also teach me, or help me better understand about certain protocols, or whether it's coordinates or initiative, I'll definitely appreciate it. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Du. That's awesome. All right. So with that, we'll maybe move on to our second delegate of the day, Flipside. Does one of you, I guess, want to introduce things?
Sure. I think Avi, who is started the governance team at Flipside, is going to start off with a quick overview of who Flipside is and what we do, and then I'll be happy to field any questions.
Awesome. Fig, maybe so Fig will be the point with all things Maker. Fig, you want to maybe introduce the rest of the team as well?
Sure. So we're joined by Ian. Ian Dobbins is a new hire focused on the Solana ecosystem. He's been involved in Saber, Marinade, Mango Markets and other developing projects on Sabre. We also have David. David is our trusty intern who's been doing everything from ETH, Solana, Terra, and kind of supporting the team. Myself is Fig. I joined Flipside back in October, focused mostly on ETH and Terra networks.
Awesome. Thanks. Yeah, we're really excited to be here. I do recognize a few familiar names. For those earlier on the call, I mentioned Du and I met in Paris. I see Jen and Juan here as well. So hey guys, and pleasure to meet everyone else. So Fig will probably likely be doing a ton of the talking here, but I thought it'd be useful to give a quick background on Flipside and the impetus for like why Flipside governance and why we're here. So from a high level overview, Flipside's been around since 2017. We're first and foremost a data infrastructure provider, multi-chain. We actually started off kind of analyzing a lot of stuff having to do with MakerDAO and Ethereum, spread out to Solana and Terra and Thorchain and Near and Harmony and a bunch of other chains. I would think of the business kind of in two ways. So the data infrastructure side, and for those that are data focused, they know how intensive it is to analyze, parse blockchain data, put it into human readable databases and make it queryable and all that good stuff. And then on the other side of that, we have an intensive or extensive bounty program where we work directly with protocols to educate users, get them integrated and analyzing data, kind of like a community focused model where we do that. So yeah, that's basically our model overall. The impetus for launching the governance team back in September of last year was, we had been working extensively in DAOs, working on, engaging, contributing, working on D2D partnerships, B2D partnerships, and just saw a lot of deficiency within governance overall across the ecosystem. Felt like the infrastructure was at a place where it was really starting to become usable and really start to find product market fit. And it really felt like some of the organizational structures on top of it, DAOs in particular, just were deficient. They weren't working. And as a core business ethos, we're providing data objectively across all these ecosystems. Our goal as a business is to just help blockchains grow and just make them what they support that promise. And it really felt like an amazing opportunity for us and all of our learnings to put that into effect. And kind of core to all of the stuff that we're doing as a team is education. And so not only are we trying to help people understand what's happening within these networks and making what's opaque on blockchain more transparent and understandable and analyzable, it felt like that kind of qualitative piece needed to be added to the governance angle and DAOs as well. So here we are. We obviously felt like Maker was the big leagues in terms of organizational structure, and there was a ton of opportunity and a ton of things we could bring to the DAO from our other experiences, and also things that we can learn and grow from in being here. So it seemed like a no-brainer for us to get involved. And yeah, here we are. So I will step down off the soapbox and hand it over to Fig to address some of the other awesome questions. If Maker Man's on, just the last anecdote, we knew things were going to be awesome and intensive here. And, we put our delegate forum post up, and then immediately Maker Man comes with like 10 to 12 really in-depth, awesome questions. And we're like, okay, here we are, let's go. It's real. So thank you for that. And we're excited.
Yeah, he's great at that. Thanks for the intro. Fig, yeah, go ahead.
Sure. Well, it was a bunch of fun learning about Du and his goals as a delegate. I'd be happy to share our platform here in the chat. As Avi kind of touched upon, Flipside is a multi-chain organization, and we've been involved in different DAOs and protocols for the last 6 to 7 months. My primary responsibility has been on ETH and particularly DeFi. That's been my background. I joined crypto in June, working at Voyager, which is a centralized brokerage firm. And then I started working at a high-frequency trading firm out of Sydney, Australia, doing DeFi research for them. I really enjoyed kind of watching the industry grow, but my critique was I wasn't learning enough. And that's how I found Flipside. I kind of saw this transition to B2D, business to DAO. And I see a lot of that opportunity in governance, right? Being able to think strategically about how a protocol grows, being able to think about partnerships, being able to think about organizational structure was things that were really interesting to me. As most, DAI is kind of one of the first things I learned about in terms of a stablecoin. And I really like the idea of creating a vault and, borrowing and posting collateral. So that was a start for me. I never was involved in it professionally, but now as we see the Delegate platform grow on Maker, we see an opportunity as a team to become more involved and challenge ourselves in what we understand in governance.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you. Do you sort of want to move on to questions or?
Yeah, I'm game to do whatever. I don't want to speak about myself all day, but so I'd love to answer some questions from the group.
Okay, yeah, anyone feel free.
Thanks so much for being here and joining us, especially on quick notice. Yeah, it's awesome to have the whole crew here. I thought a particularly relevant question for you might be the views on cross-chain as well as like multi-chain strategy. Like, is there a particular direction you want to see Maker going in this, especially given your experience with other protocols on other chains?
Yeah, when you guys were asking about a lack of interest in borrowers, this isn't a problem that just Maker's having. Anchor's dealing with a similar problem as well. I personally believe that the cross-chain future is now. It's not coming in a year to 2 years. It's happening. If you look at different governance forums, there's a ton of liquidity mining proposals going on. There's a ton of opportunities to integrate stable coins into different exchanges, into different DeFi protocols. For Maker, I think this is an opportunity that we haven't explored enough yet. Bringing DAI across chain is incredibly powerful. Offering new collateral of different types is incredibly powerful. And that would be something I would want to pioneer.
I guess as a brief follow-up, sorry, go ahead if there was more to add.
Oh, I was just going to say, yeah, and I agree with what they're saying. I think obviously we've seen some ecosystems or some protocols try and stretch themselves too thin in launching across multiple protocols and having trouble even consolidating data and not having access to performance and being able to track. So like, it's important to do that, but in a pragmatic way with some experience. And, obviously, like I think a strategy of going to obviously ETH compatible chains or Arbitrum or rollups or whatever it is to like make sure that, it's kind of attainable and it's rolled out in kind of a disciplined way. And the DAO, obviously so many smart people within the DAO that can help kind of outline that strategy. But I think we're watching the world evolve quickly and ETH become maybe not necessarily the first place that users go to interact, and some of these other platforms on top are maybe where new users that are being onboarded in the ecosystem will go first. And so we want to make sure that they have access to MakerDAO products there as well. So.
Yeah, certainly. I guess as a brief follow-up, if you'll allow it, what are some ways, I guess, mentioning that this is happening now, and there's obviously a call for speed. How do we do this safely? How do we develop safely and get this through governance process in a way that both takes advantage of the opportunity, but also doesn't overlook security concerns?
Right. I think that's a great question. I've seen a lot of protocols pioneer really interesting models like community bug bounties. I think that's important, but also, being able to willing to pay for an audit and, test it in a production environment. I think also, developing connections with the team, community partnerships are really important, but also understanding the team behind these protocols and different networks is imperative to kind of guaranteeing a smooth integration.
Yeah, there's just probably a table stakes protocols or table stakes networks that can be deployed that are probably safer bets. So kind of developing a bit of a risk assessment to understand what it would look like to deploy, whether it's worth deploying. You hate to deploy and then go to a ghost chain, 3 months later, 6 months later. So I think there's some confidence steps you could take short term. I think also I think Uniswap is a great model for how they make decisions internally or within the DAO. So they tend to be a little bit behind the curve in terms of, they just kind of approved Polygon. And that's because they have the luxury of kind of having a really established market and presence already. So they can make those they can make sure it's safe, like the water's warm kind of thing. And so sometimes that is a safer approach for established protocols. So that could be a strategy potentially that Maker deploys where, you can make the strong decisions first and then to ultimately reduce risk. So.
Awesome, thank you. I can see Kianga has a hand up, so yeah, go for it.
Hi, thank you. Thank you both, do as well, for being here. I'm excited to hear about your platforms. Wondered if you could speak about permissionlessness, and it's sort of also connected to do what you were saying about users in China and safety and security concerns and how technically we may need to re-architect some things. But just love to hear your thoughts on the permissionless nature of DAI and how that sits with you in this environment, and then also we've had to grapple with some regulatory risk, and there's some views about centralizing aspects, incorporating somewhere and to manage that risk. Just wondering any of your thoughts to do with permissionlessness of DAI and MakerDAO and how you'd like to see us grow in that context.
Yeah, great. In my perspective, centralization is a bell curve, right? You start off very centralized, and as you grow, you become more decentralized. But as you reach a certain threshold, you kind of turn around and approach centralization again. While we love to tout, this industry loves to tout like the importance of decentralization, some of the best products out there are very centralized. I'm not afraid of that. Being able to approach that in a smart manner, and that is like in terms of legal, that's in terms of onboarding new users. I think there is validity in becoming a more permissioned product. I don't think that a permissionless product still can exist. I would look at like something like Aave, who's exploring like the ARC market, and that's permissioned lending to institutions, KYC, AML, all that. So I do see a future where there can be a permissionless and a permissioned project, and I would be willing to support something of the sorts.
Awesome, thank you. David, I can see you've got your hand up, so you got a question.
Yeah, sure. This has to do with some of the stuff that you laid out about the multi-chain strategy. So what do you guys think about Maker's current approach and multi-chain strategy? Right now, for context, we're building towards Optimism, Arbitrum, and Starknet. That's pretty much like the primary place where our engineering resources are pointed. Do you kind of agree with this direction? And if you were to come in and change anything about it, what would it be?
I would add ZK sync to that list, but I think it's interesting, right? You're looking at a lot of these other money markets and lending protocols, and they're looking at other layer ones. A lot of them don't really include these rollups or these layer twos. So I think focusing on that is a great niche for Maker. I don't think a ton of users are on these chains yet, but there will be in the future. I think, right now you're laying the framework for adoption in 3 to 5 months, right? In terms of suggestions, I would say, maybe let's broaden that list a little bit to include something like ZK Sync. But I really like Arbitrum, Optimism, and Starkware so far.
Yeah, I would align there. I mean, I think obviously with the way that the architecture is, it makes sense to naturally go to roll up focus chains like Arbitrum. And so because you're still really utilizing the security idea of mainnet, and so that seems like the safest bet. And I think by the time you roll out there and Arbitrum really starts to kick off and Optimism starts to take off as well, then you'll see kind of what traction and they're getting, and if it's worth considering other chains. Obviously, the EVM strategy after that is probably the easiest transition in terms of dev resources and understanding the infrastructure, but obviously introduces a bit more risk when they're built on, if it's Moonbeam or Polkadot or Avalanche or whatever it might be. It's still, you're exposing yourselves to lots of other problems. So I love that strategy. I think it's correct in its current form, and I think you have the luxury of time to see where other places are kind of attracting critical mass and should be maybe considered. And we would love to provide that type of insight. It's kind of where we play and specialize. Be able to provide data on certain types of key metrics that might be important to the DAO, and that's kind of part of the the value add that we'd love to bring as a delegate.
Yeah, nice. I have another question, kind of a follow-up, semi-related question. With the expansion of layer 2 approaches, naturally, there is going to be an expansion of resources that are needed, whether it's a new core unit or a new sub-team of PE or something that works on these. So the question is related to kind of the surplus buffer management strategy question of the DAO. So are you for the burn, or are you for a more aggressive growth strategy? And what would you vote for if the vote was up today?
Would lean towards a more aggressive strategy. To fund all these core units, you need to have that, right? I think we were talking among delegates, there's currently 21 core units. That's a massive amount of expenses. As you kind of create more infrastructure and incur more costs, you need to be able to be willing to spend more money. While the maker burn mechanism is important for the asset itself, to fund growth, you need to kind of allow the surplus to happen.
All right, thanks, David. I can see Tim's got his hand up as well. Tim, do you have a question?
Yeah, sure. So thanks you guys for putting up your platform. Sorry to jump into this a little bit late, but I kind of wanted to ask a little bit of a clarifying question. You mentioned a lot of these strategic approaches to other EVM compatible chains. Is anyone on your team a protocol? Do people have that technical expertise, or would this be more sort of your strategic insights coming from Flipside writ large?
Yeah, we're currently hiring for somebody who's focused on rollups and ZK knowledge. Right now, we don't have somebody for that role, but our larger org has a lot of experience with that. Right now, our team is 60. When you delegate with us, you get all power of full 60. Right now, the Flipside governance team is 4, about to be 5 strong. And we're focused on delegation and voting and thinking strategically, but we have the capabilities to create these insights and kind of understand growth across different networks and blockchains.
Yeah, and Tim, maybe just to clarify, are you asking, do we have Solidity devs that would be able to deploy contracts on these chains? Is that kind of the nature of the question, or more do we have experts to be able to parse the data?
Kind of in between. So I think there's no dearth of strategic insights or high level thoughts in Maker. I think when the rubber hits the road, that's when it gets hard. And so I was asking if you'd be able to provide sort of a unique insight to say, hey, if you're going to approach this EVM chain, here's the steps you might want to take, basically reducing the load. Reason being is because if you provide a lot of strategic insight and then it ends up just falling on the dev's shoulders, then I think we're already kind of a little strapped in that case. And so it's a twofold thing. It's just all right, well, that sounds really cool. I like that insight. So what other additional thing can you do? And so I think we got a little bit of that answer already. So I was just kind of trying to dig a little bit.
Yeah, totally. And yeah, so in that sense, I think Fig covered most of it, and just clarifying kind of note on our overall team structure at Flipside is being 60 strong, we're pretty flat, and the way we design it is people can follow their interests and kind of demands of who we're working with. So that's a great push. If you need kind of a more pragmatic, hands-on approach to some of these implementations or decisions, we do have people internally that can surface that, and we would just lean into their expertise and looping them in if that's what's needed. So yeah, that's great.
Totally makes sense. Thanks for clarifying.
Asa, if I understand it correctly, you're not using any agent-based simulations like Gauntlet. Gauntlet loves to use a lot of the tooling, which is simulations and of stability fees, interest rates, what have you. So you guys are using that, right?
Yeah, it's a great question. We actually, I mean, we built some simulation solutions ourselves. We're certainly not a competitor to Gauntlet at all, but our basic data infrastructure is designed to be leveraged in some of those types of simulations, and our community of analysts many have data science backgrounds and expertise in building solutions that may solve that. We've done it for Levana, a couple Terra-based protocols. So it's there, but I would think of us a bit more as like providing the primordial soup for some of those types of analyses to be performed.
So it could be a combination of both, I guess, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I'd say Gauntlet's more risk focused. We're more, just trying to surface different insights, no matter what form they may be. We have an internal data science team, and then we also have a community of north of 9,000 full of analysts.
Awesome. I guess I'll maybe ask a question if there's a brief gap. So I think from what I've seen, not to sort of assume too much, but I think Maker is a lot more like complex, both in terms of sort of parameters and levers available to governance, and also in the sort of structure. As we sort of mentioned, like 21 core units is a lot, and that kind of implies a fairly large like management load on the sort of shoulders of governance, right? So I guess I'm kind of curious if you guys have a sort of like onboarding plan, or if you have sort of any sort of strategy for sort of getting, I guess, up to speed with Maker and sort of everything that's going on, or if that's something you considered.
Yeah, absolutely. As soon as we decided as a team to run at this, we started doing research. So David is actually in the midst of doing some very in-depth research on Maker. He's presenting to us on Friday. And so that's kind of part of our process, is engaging with any protocols to understand the way that they function and operate in depth, and really internalize it, and then put it into action. So yeah, I mean, I think Fig and we are already fairly familiar with how Maker operates, but that's part of our onboarding process, is to make sure it's we got it down cold.
And I think a lot is learned through conversations like these, asking hard questions, meeting some of the people in the room that we're working together with, being involved in different groups, and living on the forums is really important. You're right, Maker is complex, and we want to kind of smooth some of that complexity. When you look at new user growth, they don't understand like what a surplus mechanism is, right? They understand a stable coin, that means it's $1. So kind of being able to translate that and represent that to a wider community is really important to us.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Getting a little close to time, but we've probably got time for one or two more questions if anybody has any.
I guess, how directly do you plan to engage kind of with the governance process? Like, do you see yourselves making proposals, submitting requests, that sort of thing, or more just weighing in on proposals that others have submitted?
I love to create proposals. That's a good thing and a bad thing. I don't think that will happen off the bat, but as you ramp up, maybe a month or two in, I would love to actually create proposals and propose different partnerships. Right now, we're going to start a regular cadence to align with those Monday and Friday voting blocks. So kind of setting up some of that infrastructure internally and just getting used to some of the content and discussion happening on Maker. But yes, I love proposals. Be careful.
I love your confidence.
It's good and bad. I have a whole, history of forum proposals. So I think
That
that's
actually, yeah, that actually brings up a great point. What I would love to see on your guys' platform is actually links to some of your other things that you're really proud of. I think we'd have to go digging pretty hard, and it might be really nice to just have a couple links to some of the grants you passed that you were proud of, or some of the other forum proposals that you put up. I think that would just help the rest of the community. And also, selfishly would love to read.
Yeah, definitely. Tim, if you want to drop your forum username, and I'll craft up a comment right after this.
Actually, I meant on your platform. Just link them all in there. Just drop them down. But sure, yeah,
Okay.
I'll DM you.
Yeah.
Let's work on it. Sounds great.
Great.
All right. Like I said, we're approaching time, so if there's nothing else, we can maybe move into final words. Yeah, is there anything you guys want to sort of wrap up with? Anything you want to shout out in terms of comms or yeah, any sort of final statement?
No, just, echo, we're really happy and excited to be here. Thank you guys all for the thoughtful questions and your willingness to kind of welcome ourselves and sorry.
Yeah, we're really excited. Find us, we're in the Discord. We'll be active, and please, we love to talk. We love to experiment and strategize and think and collaborate. So please, we genuinely reach out and let's talk. And Doe, thank you as well. Great job.
All right, yeah, cool. I think we'll wrap it up there then. So yeah, huge thank you to Flipside and to Do. Thanks for doing this. I think it really helps people get an idea of what you guys care about. So yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, cheers everyone. See you all at the next one.